Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session on securing your networks using best practice. My name is Emma O'Sullivan and I'm the Marketing Executive at Axos. Today I'm also joined by Claire and Gemma in the room with me. Claire is our ITIL Marketing Lead and Gemma is our Marketing Lead for RESILIA. So before we hand over to John today, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping bits with everyone. So first of all, the session is recorded and you'll be emailed a copy of this tomorrow. So if you do want to share the session with colleagues or friends, then please do so. The second thing to let you guys know is that you are on mute. So if you do have any questions, just put those into the Q&A box, which you should see on the left-hand side of your screen. If these are technical issues, I'll try and answer them straight away. But if they are subject related, we will save them for the end for the Q&A. Also, just to remind you, we've got loads of great content for you to access, which again is on the left-hand side of your screen in the resources section. So we've got lots of information on ITIL Practitioner and RESILIA. Finally, we do have a quick feedback survey which will pop up on your screen at the end of the session. It's just a couple of really quick questions, but it's really helpful for us if you could feed that in to let us know how we can improve for next time. So that's it from me. I'm now going to hand over to John, who will present for about 40 minutes and then 20 minutes of Q&A. So John is a Systems and Governance Manager from Intrinsic Technology.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend and to hopefully learn a little bit about how best practice from ITIL and RESILIA can help you achieve GDPR compliance along with a few other standards. If you have any questions during the presentation, please do ask them. Gemma and Claire will take care of those, and we will get to those at the end. But before we start, what I'd like to do is just have a quick questions and poll, if we may. So if you could just answer the questions there. Have you started your GDPR compliance report? Yes or no? We'll just give about 30 seconds for everybody to answer that one before we move on. We're not going to hold anyone to anything on this. It's just so we can get an idea of where everybody is in their journey, because pretty much everybody will have to take this journey. We just need to understand how that looks like. So what we can do now is we can have a look at the results and see what everybody said. So we can see that it's close to 50-50, and that's what I've found from my experience out there working with public and private sector companies within the UK. A lot of people are planning to. A lot of people have stuck on where to actually begin. And one of the big areas that we find is this next poll, which I'd like to ask, which is, do you believe your network is patched and up to date? Again, just a quick 30 seconds to answer that question for me if you could. Again, I'm not going to hold anyone to anything on this. This is just indicative so we can get an idea of where everybody is. So we'll move through to see what the results are. And this is about where we see. So Intrinsic Technology, an Intel company, are a network and unified provider. We work with customers around this, and that's roughly what we see. A lot of people don't want to touch the network because it's working and it's just too critical. Plus, it's always the network fault when everything goes wrong, even when it isn't. The big question, though, that allows you to give the foundation of any good service is, do you have a full CMDB for your network estate to include hardware versions, software, and software versions? Again, just a quick 30 seconds if you can answer that question for me. Again, just indicative. Just give us an idea of where everybody is, because this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we see out there in the market today. So we'll move through onto that one. And this one comes as no surprise. A lot of people don't have a CMDB for their network. It's too critical, it's too important, and it doesn't get touched. But we have to remember that compliance means that we should be putting the latest patches and bug fixes into that estate as soon as available. But that sounds like a very challenging and difficult time for us all. A lot of people see it as an arduous journey. doesn't need to be that way. So what I'd like to do is explore how using ITIL and RESILIA frameworks, we can actually work smarter and not harder. So what do we expect to take away from this presentation and talk today? Essentially, how applying ITIL and RESILIA will allow your cybersecurity approach to mature. How you can focus on the value of good cybersecurity within your business, and how you can use the RESILIA framework to actually baseline where you are today and where your improvement areas need focus. You will also understand how to start the journey of organizational change management from ITIL Practitioner. Probably one of the most important features, because security teams are often seen as the department of no, and we don't need to be seen that way. That's not what we're there for. We're there to enable the business to operate and do what it needs to do, but maintain security around it, rather than be the voice of, no, you can't do that. But we'll also explore how do we achieve compliance with, and not just GDPR. So the first question that we often face for information security is, why do we need it? You know, it's, pardon me, it's an absolute necessity. We want to protect our business data for commercial reasons, and we've got to protect our customers' data for legal reasons. We don't want to expose our network to absolutely anybody, and we work hard to make sure that we are keeping the right people, or the wrong people, if you will, out of our network. But more importantly than that, we have got GDPR coming on the 25th of May 2018. And a lot of people across Europe are going to have to comply with these regulations. If you're outside of Europe, but you're processing European citizens' data, either as a processor or you're transacting with them, the same rules will apply. You will also have to have a representative within the EU border. After 2019, that may or may not include Britain. So something to think about for everybody there. One of those areas that we want to think about for post-Brexit is Privacy Shield. So Privacy Shield, as it stands, is an agreement between the EU and the United States. But after Brexit, Britain may not be a part of the EU. So there is a big question around Privacy Shield and how that intends to go forward. That's already been raised by the UK Parliament system. That is being addressed at a government level. But today, we don't know where we are with that one, and we're going to have to work with that. So what we've done is we've looked at different bodies and who actually is prescribing a good strategy for cybersecurity. So we picked on the National Cybersecurity Centre for the UK, the European Commission, and the US Department of Homeland Security. They collectively have set out what that country's response and plan is for the next few years to address the concerns of their citizens and their businesses to protect them from the threats that are out there. What we need to see is that a lot of people and businesses want to take that approach, but are struggling how to find that starting point and how to begin that journey. What that leads to, and not being in a secure place, is examples like this. Cooper employee stole 500,000 customers' data. Insider threats are probably some of the greatest threats that we face day to day. What we also need to consider are other areas such as external threats, so hackers and hacktivists and external threats. Now, if you are a public body, that may be external bodies, state threats. It's unlikely if you're a private sector that would be the case, but something that we should all consider. Looking at the fines and what we've actually seen today, I'm picking just on the UK, as that's where we're based. The UK today is experiencing approximately £1.4 billion in fines per year from the ICO. That's for data breaches and poor practices around data protection. What we need to consider is, we know that there's a new level of fines for GDPR. We know that they are considerably increased, but there's a two-tier approach. If, using the data that we have here done by PCI DSS, data breaches continued at today's rate and top-level fines were imposed, post-GDPR implementation, we would have £122 billion worth of fines implied each year within the UK alone. That's just the UK, not anywhere else within Europe. So what does that actually really mean? And if we understand that we've got a lot of fines and the potential is greatly increased, what do we need to do to actually make a start? So we've got 9 months and 10 days before GDPR becomes active. When we take out holidays, Christmas, New Year, weekends, that becomes considerably less. So we have to start, and we have to start today. So how do we start? A lot of the areas that we're focusing on are around different standards such as NIST, SOX, ISO, HIPAA, Cyber Essentials, PCI, any of those things. And that creates a lot of work for a lot of people. But what we find is it's quite like flying a jumbo jet and trying to rewire it mid-flight. But it doesn't need to be. It can be made much more simple. And we do that by using ITIL and RESILIA. It's nice and easy. So if we think to GDPR first, GDPR focuses on the processing of data. That means your data protection officer, your governance teams, they'll drive the change in the business. They'll take care of that one. We've got somebody that looks after all of this. I don't need to worry. My network's okay. But stop and think, how does your data move across your network, across your company? It goes across the network. Without your network, there is no business. It's that critical to the business from there. GDPR isn't for the technical world to concern itself with. Is another piece of information I often hear bounded back at me. Our governance and the data protection teams will take care of it. Please don't fall into that trap. There are two angles that need to be taken for GDPR. One is the technical measures, and that's what we need to address here, and the organizational measures, which is all around processes, procedures, data protection policies, and so on and so forth. As a technical person, you need to work closely with your compliance teams. As a compliance person, you need to work closely with your technical teams. To explain that a little bit better, think of your organization as a person. The heart of the organization is your strategy. The brains is its people. The bones is its governance. Data is the lifeblood. Your network's the circulatory system. On their own, they're pretty much useless. But put them together, and you've got an amazing system. They are totally symbiotic. You need to approach them in that manner. When I'm outside Europe, GDPR doesn't apply to me. Again, if you've got European citizens' data either acting as a processor on behalf of a controller within the EU or transacting with the EU citizens, you will have to apply to these rules. And if you're outside of the EU working as a controller, then you will need a European representative within the borders of the EU. Article 27 within the GDPR legislation, which is available from the European Commission, will give you the details of what's required from there. There are 99 articles in total, and but 2 of those refer to the security, but they are quite high level and need to be thought about. So Article 25 is our first one. Data protection by design and default. Anybody who's familiar with ISO 27001 could probably spot where that came from. It's very, very similar to security by design and default. And then Article 32 talks about the security of processing. Now, the addition of accountability means evidence will be required and must be in place before the 25th of May 2018. That's not to suggest that anybody's going to come and audit you on day one, but you have to be able to evidence it in case you are asked. So what does that actually really mean for your network, having evidence of what your network is and you've got data protection by design? So Article 25, if we focus on that one first, you need to consider when it comes to designing your network and your services, what are the current available technologies? What's the cost of the implementation? What's the nature, scope, context, and the purpose of processing and the risks to people's rights in the event of a breach? Now, that is a direct quote from the legislation. At no point does it say you have to have AES 256 encryption or you've got to have two-factor authentication. What it says is you should consider the right answer. So there is no right or there is no wrong, but you have to prove that you've taken the relevant answer for the risk that you've foreseen. Now that is very beyond the scope of most compliance teams because that requires quite a deep level of technical understanding. That's where the IT managers and the technical security wizards will really come into their own, and that's why I say that you have to work together on this. IT are going to be expected to ensure that the technical measures are documented and available, and the business will, using a privacy impact assessment, identify the types of data that need to be protected. It's a collective work experience that everyone will actually do and deliver. We are the experts within IT, and we've got to advise the business on the right solution to meet the requirements from there. So we also mentioned Article 32. And Article 32 talks about pseudonymization, encryption, ensuring confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience, and a process for testing, assessing, and evaluating the effectiveness of the controls. So what that means is pseudonymization might be right, encryption might be right, and you need to ensure that you've got confidentiality, integrity, availability, resilience. Resilience is a very important piece. With a lot of companies that I speak to, I've found that the business continuity processes cover fire, flood, theft, the usual, but very, very few have talked about a ransomware outbreak or a cyber resilience event. And that's quite a worry because realistically, cyber threats are far more common than floods and fires today, which is a fantastic result on a health and safety level. But for our world, it means that we need to mature quite quickly. The other thing to take from this is it does not mean all data has got to be encrypted, only that we consider suitable. The business will make that decision, but we know that they're going to approach IT to make it happen. Because again, that's a technical piece. The governance and compliance teams will need the network to offer the required levels of security for that business. Now, the thing to remember there is different areas of the business may have different confidentiality levels of the data. That doesn't mean you're going to have 4 different networks, one for confidential, one for secure, so on and so forth. Your one network is going to satisfy all of those. So you have to consider the highest risk and work at that level. But then we also need to add in data portability, because that's been added as part of GDPR. Those who are in the UK will be familiar with the consistent adverts that we're placed with on changing bank or changing electricity or gas supplier, and how easy that's become. That same model is now being applied to our data on our own individual level across businesses within the EU. That data should be sent from controller to controller in a commonly used format. More often than not, that's accepted to be a CSV file, because that's common machine readable, and that's a direct quote from the legislation. This doesn't apply if it's in the public interest or official authority. So if you're a public body or you're within the police, fire, ambulance, security services, that rule doesn't apply. Working holistically across your business is important for this. Utilising the RESILIA framework to identify the strategy and the design will support you and will make your role much, much easier in how you're actually going to achieve this, because there's a lot to consider. So let's explore what implementation tools we have and how we can actually start our GDPR journey using best practice and tools that exist within RESILIA to actually do most of the work for us. Anyone who's familiar with ITIL will understand the life cycles. It all starts with a strategy. Without a strategy, we've got nowhere to begin. Once we've got our idea of what we want to do, we start to design how we're going to deliver that idea. Once we've started to design how we're going to deliver that idea, we start to transition that from theory into practice. That might be going and purchasing the software or implementing a new server or a new routing table on a core switch. Once we've done that, we're then in a position to run the service. What we should then do, and I say should then because it's not as common as I'd like to see across the industry, is review, assess and improve that service from there. because we need to make sure that we're maintaining relevance and value for the end users. If we're maintaining relevance and value, then there is a reason for that service to continue. So if we understand that, and that's what ITIL is based on, and we know that we've got over 100,000 people within the world who are ITIL aligned, and it's been going for over 20 years in over 100 countries, and it's accepted that it's good, solid practice, why wouldn't you apply that to cyber security and cyber resilience? What RESILIA does is builds on the established and accepted best practice ITIL. It breaks that into 5 areas. Understanding each of the life cycles to mature your approach to cyber security allows you the easiest, and simplest path to improvement and compliance. Now, the thing to take from this is, much like ITIL, it's a framework, so it's not applied to one particular standard. It will actually work for all of them. An information security management system is an information security management system, be that for PCI, NIST, SOX, GDPR, 27001. They're all the same. A good quote that's relevant here from Warren Buffett: it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And that's quite true. We have all of us put hard work in to see it destroyed within a few minutes quite quickly and quite easily. Stick with the 5. 5 is definitely the magic number. There are 5 life cycles, and there are 5 measures of maturity if we use the Capability Maturity Model Index, which we should, in my opinion. So let's explore a cyber resilience strategy. What should we do to have a strategy, and what should a strategy contain? So we need to understand the objective and the context. So what we mean by that is, what do we actually want to achieve? What is it that we want to protect, and why do we need it? Then we've got to define the scope and constraints. So we're not going to make sure that our cybersecurity policy goes onto everybody's personal electronic device if that device can't access our systems. So we maintain a good and defined scope of the systems and areas that we cover, or the business functions that will be supported of this, and that allows us to make sure that we're staying and we're focused on the goals in hand. We should also detail the constraints that we face. That might be financial, it might be resource. We should get all of this down in our strategy, because a good strategy is the foundation of a good service. We want to identify the assets that require protection, the important stakeholders. When we think about stakeholders, we need to understand what's in it for them, and we need to make sure that they understand the value of that service, which we'll go through into ITIL Practitioner shortly. Legal and regulatory requirements, risk strategies, management systems, roles and responsibilities, and resources. If we've identified all of those areas, we have the foundation of a very good cyber resilience strategy. So now we can start to move into design. Now, when it comes to design, why would we not integrate this with our current management system, ISO, PCI, DSS? Let's not do a job twice. Let's do it once. Work smarter, not harder. Understand your information classifications. What controls do you need to put in around not classified or unmarked, unprotected? Very few. But the confidential and the highly confidential probably need a few more. How are you going to ensure that security and privacy by design and default are in? Change management is probably the way that you do that one. How do you intend to deliver education and awareness training? Like we said earlier about the threats, insider threats are probably some of our biggest, and we need education and awareness in place to consistently reinforce what we're doing. Have you got the necessary policies and procedures? That's not saying go and write them. Work with your governance and compliance teams to actually develop them. And perhaps most importantly, include cyber resilience testing in your BCDR plans. It's only a matter of time until something comes along and hits, and then your BCDR plans won't have tested for that. So let's look at transition. Transition should ensure that the business and the technology changes are managed in a way that supports the objectives, and it ensures a smooth and simple change into operational use. Now, each change and each organization is going to be different. That's the joy of the framework. But if you're focused on security by design for ISO PCI and privacy by design for GDPR, your evidence has started to satisfy multiple requirements. Because security by design and privacy by design, the borders are very, very grey. Nice and simple. You've done a job once. Don't repeat the F. So you've got your strategy, you've got your design, you've transitioned it into operation. Now you're running it. Now you need to actually understand how effective is it at protecting your environment. If it's not effective, then it's not good enough. You need to act on that one, because it's going to be you that gets the call on Friday 4 o'clock to step in and actually fix that one, and there goes your weekend, much like the NHS did one to WannaCry. You also need to deliver education and awareness and consistently repeat that one. If you're not delivering the education and awareness, it will fall off the radar. People will move on to the next big interesting thing, and they will forget about this. Practice your cyber incident event handling. It only takes one person with one email to unleash a world of devastation within your estate. So if we talk about improvement, controls, how are they working? How do you know if they're working is a very difficult question. Is there a better way to work? We could decrease costs. We might increase efficiency. One of the most important parts is, how do your stakeholders feel about the cyber strategy? How are they responding to it, and do they see the value in it? Deeming cycle. Plan, do, check, act. It is a journey. Each journey through the cycle will offer improvements each time. And with each improvement, your work becomes easier and easier and easier from there. So let's have a look at the snapshot tool from RESILIA and what it actually brings to us. So it's a set of questions, and it looks at the 5 life cycles and breaks down each of the areas and asks you where your target is between 1 to 5, where you want to be, and then asks you some questions around that and rates you from there, and presents you a graph that shows where your gaps are and where you're ahead of the game. This then allows you to identify where you want to be. But remembering that 5 is the magic number, this is a journey, not a sprint. Don't always rush to level 5. Level 3 might be the right level for your organization. Be realistic. Progress iteratively with this. Take small steps. Journey of 1,000 miles, we all know that quote, but don't rush towards level 5. Start at level 1 and apply a continual service improvement cycle through from there, and you will find that the actual increasing up to level 5, if that's your target, will become an awful lot easier. But to get to level 5, you're going to have to show wisdom across your entire business. So how do we start to develop wisdom? So anybody who's done the ITIL foundations will know the DIKW model. It shows how you'll start with data. From the raw data, you'll get information, and that information might be from a security incident event management system. Have 15 events in a month. From that information, you can get knowledge. So why did we get 15 events in a month? What was the cause of them? What was the effect of them? Think cause and effect, or Ishikawa indeed. From the knowledge comes wisdom. The wisdom is making an informed and mature decision based on what's in front of you. Observing directly what's going on in your estate will give you good data, which is the foundation to lead to wisdom. A very long time ago, I don't know when, Confucius actually said there's 3 ways that we can learn wisdom. First is by reflection, which is noblest. It takes a long time. Second is by imitation, which is easiest. That might be using the ITIL and RESILIA best practice frameworks, where other people have done the reflection and the experience and learned the hard way and then documented it for you to learn from. And the third is by experience, which is the bitterest. I am a huge fan of the second method of learning wisdom. So let's look at smooth and successful change across a business. We want to implement GDPR, but we are going to face barriers within the business from there. We need to plan, do, check, act. Again, simple ITIL deeming cycle, but that is the foundation of a good continual improvement program, because GDPR is a maturation of data protection, and we should approach the project in the same way. But whether improvements being delivered by change, project, program, or any other approach, organizational change management is not an additional framework. It's an integral part of any change, and it underpins every improvement initiative that you will take within a business. Changing people's attitudes to security is probably the most difficult. Changing a network estate is relatively simple by comparison. Getting people on board with your change and helping them understand why it's so important and creating that need for change can be one of the most difficult things. So let's look at how we actually start with organizational change management. So we need to have clear and relevant objectives. That sounds an awful lot like what we've done with our cyber resilience strategy. We need strong and committed leadership. Without leadership, you will struggle more. You have to ensure that your key stakeholders are involved and bought in and supporting your change across the business. You need willing, prepared participants. Raise awareness. If people aren't aware why something's changing, they won't change. And then you need sustained improvement. So simply rolling this out and then moving on to the next project and never looking back is not an option. This is not going away. This is staying around, and you need to be constantly improving, more importantly, because you can make your own life easier on a day-to-day basis. So with clear and relevant objectives, again, RACI model. We're all familiar with RACI. Responsible, accountable, consultant, and informed. So somebody needs to have responsibility. One person needs accountability. So it's their job to make sure that a certain action is completed. Other teams may be consulted, other teams may be informed, and somebody's going to be made responsible for completing that action. If you detail that out, then it is very clear for your delivery team who's doing what and when they're doing it. It's not to say there's no wiggle room for people to get out of, but it just makes sure that everyone is aware of what is expected of them. So strong, committed leadership, we said, was important. And understanding your stakeholders and who you should prioritize is probably one of the most important parts of organizational change management. Help those people manage everybody through the change. Their teams and their departments are going to have to change. Your job is to help those leaders support their teams. So there's two examples here from the ITIL Practitioner piece. Now, Kubler-Ross talks about the change curve. Could be quite close to the grief cycle, but everybody goes through these stages, the speed of which varies from person to person. That's what makes managing people more fun or interesting. If we use the left model, what we've got is how people see a new project or a new way of working. At the start, people are not ready for it and they're not aligned. They're actually struggling to lose the way that they used to work. They're difficult to let go. As we go through, readiness increases and the new beginning starts, and we can see the benefits from there. So again, just to reinforce, if no one understands why they're changing or what they're changing, they just won't do it. We've had our technology trigger, and some would argue that we're at the peak of inflated expectations right now around GDPR. We are all seeing adverts left, right, and centre for all sorts of solutions. So there's a lot of visibility. What we'll find that comes next is the trough of disillusionment, where people think this is just too big. We're not ready. We can't do this. And then once you've actually detailed your strategy, your design, and your transition, they'll go, actually, yes, we can. We'll get through this, and you'll reach that plateau of productivity sooner. Again, the visibility we know is going to happen. That time frame is X, and it's down to you to get people through that sooner and easier to make your own life that little bit easier. So, once we've got everyone on board, we're helping people through the change, and we've got a strong and committed leadership behind us, now we need to maintain the improvements. We've got to maintain our focus and momentum on that one. So, completing compliance is fantastic, but businesses change. IT's job is to support the business in achieving its goals. Security's job is to support IT in making sure that that estate is valuable to the business and is secure. You have to keep the momentum of improvement present. Keep your training and awareness programs going. Look at what reviews and reports and metrics you can actually get from the system, and gather stakeholder feedback. Ask people, what do you think of this? Has it been worthwhile? What could we do better? Understanding what you can do better allows you to align your next improvement to people's needs. The relevance remains, the values improve, your work becomes easier and easier from there. So moving into ITIL on the actual practitioner level, there are 9 guiding principles, and I've done my ITIL Practitioner, I believe it was about a year ago now. This, for me, was the missing manual for ITIL. It was all of the life cycles are how to do it. This is actually how to achieve good, solid change and how to actually improve things to the ITIL model. And those 9 principles are good ways to actually work to, and probably the best advice that you could receive for any job. But if we start at the beginning of it, let's focus on value. Again, let's use the ITIL model. We've got our value model from there. Utility and warranty, or fit for purpose and fit for use. If it's not fit for purpose and fit for use, it won't be used. The customer determines the value of the service you provide, not you. If they don't see the value in it, it will be avoided and bypassed. You need to make sure that it's relevant for your customers. So you need to design for experience. The picture we've got there shows a fire exit where it's at least 6 foot off the floor. I hope no one ever has to go running out of it, because they won't just need a fire engine, they'll also probably need an ambulance to deal with the legs that are broken once the fall is completed. But retain the focus on value, but understand that the experience that both customers and users have when they interact with your service is critical. A poor experience will lead to a lack of use. Start where you are. Most businesses are already compliant with the Data Protection Act. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's very expensive and time-consuming. Probably an ineffective use of your time. Use what you have and apply the continual service improvement approach. Think about your network. How many updates do you think you need to apply? Let's pick on Cisco. Other network vendors and patches are available, but Cisco was probably the most prolific. Today, there are over 500 patches available for Cisco devices with the CVSS ranking of high or critical. 179 of those are rated at CVSS to 8 and above. So absolutely critical. 170, that's a lot of patches. That's a lot of potential downtime for your estate. Staying on top of that is quite difficult. So what you have to do is you have to work holistically. Your network doesn't stand alone. With no servers and endpoints, your network is mostly irrelevant, and vice versa. Expand beyond technology with that principle. Business functions all contribute to the business strategy. Progress iteratively. You may want to advance your cyber resilience strategy to a very mature level, but breaking it down into smaller steps that are more realistic and achievable will allow you to show your progress and successes easier. A large collection of small changes adds up to a large change. Observing directly is really important. Don't work to assumptions on what departments do and how they do things. That will lead to errors. If you manage a network, do you monitor it to see what's going on and at what sort of time so you can provide the right service? Probably. In that case, you're directly observing. You might use a monitoring tool for that one, but you're actually seeing what the network's used for and how much capacity you've got left, and you can create action plans from there. Understanding the change should be absolutely no different. Being transparent is probably one of the most important things. Too many people will jump to the wrong conclusions about things. The more people that are aware of what's happening and why it's happening, the more people will help and fewer people will obstruct. You need everybody on board for this. So collaborate. When the right people are involved in the right ways, improvements benefit from better buy-in, better relevance, and better likelihood of success. You could take it on your own.
Hi everyone, I think we're having a bit of an issue with the audio, so if you just give us 2 or 3 minutes, we'll get John back up for you. Thank you.
Apologies, everybody. My voice line dropped. So if I go back to the time when we had 340, so we'll just go back a couple of slides. Can everybody hear me now? Okay, brilliant. So, being transparent, the more people are aware of what's actually happening in the business and why it's happening, the more people will help and fewer people will obstruct you. This will make your own life easier in actually delivering a GDPR compliance project. So collaborate across the teams. When the right people are involved in the right ways, improvements benefit from better buy-in, better relevance, and better likelihood of success. You could take this on your own, but that's an awful lot of work for everybody. It will be easier if you've got a good team to work with. You may have already seen the slide, so the joke may be ruined now, clearly, but understand that language is key. That joke may be funny to some, maybe not funny to others, but the same principle applies in the language IT use all the day. So we're constantly at O365 or UDP, TCP, or all these languages. The finance team might talk about the net book value of the network. We don't understand what that is in the world of IT. They do. That's what their business function brings to the party. IT make all of the functions able to do what they need to do. So keep it simple. Understand that from there. So let's recap. What we need to do is understand that the 9 ITIL guiding principles will allow you to actually drive change through your business and to make that successful. However, what change do you want to drive? That's where the RESILIA framework steps in. Use that tool to actually allow you to do a gap analysis on where you are today, start where you are, and then drive the corrective action plan based on your findings from there. But again, be realistic with your measures. Don't expect to go into a CMMI 5. Maybe don't start off a level 2 or a 3. Be realistic with where you are. That framework tool will highlight the gaps for you from there. So my apologies. Internet connection dropped momentarily. So let's move on to some Q&As that we've had. So let's just go through what we've got. So one question we've had is,
John.
what are the Hello.
Hello. Do you want me to go through the questions that we've had so far from our participants?
Yeah,
can
that's
read them
okay.
out for you. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So we've had a few coming in throughout the presentation, so I'll try and get them all done and do them in order. So our first question was, what are the prerequisites to plan for securing our existing website?
Right, so one of the things that anyone planning to secure a website needs to consider is what data is on there. And it was only in the news today, Islington Council will fine £70,000 for not securing people's data from car parking tickets. A simple manipulation of the URL allowed people to actually go and see medical details of other people who've been appealing parking tickets and so on and so forth. So you need to really think about what are you planning to do with the data, what do you intend to do with it, making sure your privacy notice is up to date, but then also that the relevant security is in place. So think SQL injection, think URL manipulation. But first and foremost, in relation to GDPR compliance, understand the risks to the data that's there. Now, if the data is stuff that is manifestly public, you don't need to worry as much. If it, however, it's very sensitive, say medical, then you should be putting very, very high levels of security on it. Understanding the risks and the rights of people given under the GDPR is the first point to start in understanding whether your website is actually compliant or not, or whether you actually need to actually do anything at all.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. Hopefully that answered the question. Next question we've got is, what happens to right to be forgotten?
Right, so the right to be forgotten is there. and it is within the GDPR. We haven't mentioned it as such because from a networking point of view, and the focus of the talk is around networking, the network is a transit level of your data. Your compliance areas and your compliance officers will make sure that the right to be forgotten is considered. Now, some of the questions I've had in the past talk about backups and everything like that. Now, that's where pseudonymization comes in, because if your data is pseudonymized, then the person has already been forgotten. So the right to be forgotten doesn't necessarily have to affect backups. Question that you've got to ask yourself there is, if you're going to keep backups for statistical purposes, so within Intrinsic, we do model on what sort of faults we are likely to expect on what sort of equipment in what sort of areas at what times. We're able to look at that level of forecasting. So that means that there's a requirement for us to keep that data. So our privacy notice will advise people that we intend to keep that data. Now, the personal data will be removed, but part of our privacy notice, that's there. So the right to be forgotten is an important piece, but that's more for your compliance teams rather than your technical teams.
Right. Okay. Thanks, John. Next question. To what level will a company need to prove they comply with the right to erasure?
So effectively, if that right to be forgotten is invoked, then you're going to have to basically evidence that you have removed all of their personal data. So standard, what we'll call them SAR timeframes, so it's been reduced to 30 days, apply. Now, again, refer back to my comments about backups and pseudonymization. So if you are keeping statistical information, finding a way to actually remove the personally identifiable information is probably the simplest and easiest way to ensure that old and historic backups haven't got that level of data. But you also need to ensure that your supplier frameworks are covered as well. So if you are a white label network company and you might take out WAN services from BT, then there will be some PII that goes through. So you need to consider your data flows of where does your data come in, what do you do with it, where do you store it, how is it stored, and then what do you do with it. Because you're also going to need to work with your suppliers to actually make sure that the right to be forgotten is completed through to them as well. So having a chat with your suppliers and making sure that they've started on this journey is, again, something that should be done very, very urgently. Because if they haven't, you need to drive them through it. You are collectively responsible. As a processor, if the controller has done exactly what you've told them to, and there's been a breach, then the controller will take liability. If, however, the processor has not worked exactly the way the controller has wanted them to, then the controller and the processor will take the hit, because the controller should be fully aware of what the processor is doing. So there's a split liability there, and that can become problematic. So when we talk about right to erasure, we've got to consider suppliers. And again, the privacy notice consent is king. Making sure that people understand what you're doing with their data will actually drive down people's desire to be forgotten. So that's a difficult one, that one.
Yeah, that's great. Next one. Do I need a data protection officer?
So again, something else I'm seeing a lot of in the market. A lot of people asking that question. So if you're in the public sector, then yes, you do. It's that simple. If you have more than 250 employees in your organisation or group of organisations, then yes, you do. If you don't meet either of those, you don't. But it would be best advice, and it's definitely best practice, to nominate a lead for that, because you are likely to be in a chain, much like a mortgage, but in that data protection chain, someone needs to take that lead, because you're going to work with other areas and other businesses to actually make sure right to be forgotten is delivered as and when it needs to be.
Okay. Time for a few more, I think. Maybe 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Next one, is segmenting my network enough to offer compliance level protection?
Well, so that is a very common question that I'm asked by a lot of businesses. So can they just say, right, we'll only deal with sensitive information and this segment, and I'll create a VLAN where we do all of that? You could, but realistically, understanding the process and the data flows that you would have to then understand, and then what happens when it comes to cross-communication? The honest answer is you'll create an effort and work for work's sake. One network, one data transport, nice and simple, but offer the relevant protection to the highest level of data. That will then automatically filter down to the three. I say that there's four because if we use ISO 27001 as our four standards, we'll meet PCI, we'll meet all of the other standards as well. So again, we're only working once and we're working smarter, not harder. Then you can understand that in applying the top level to your network, what you've done is you've actually done the other 75% of the standards. Well, we've achieved this. So rather than creating an overly complex technical network that's then difficult to monitor, difficult to manage, having one simple network that actually works easier, using the guiding principle of keeping it simple, I would say probably not.
Okay, thanks, John. And then I think I've got time for one more question. Where do I begin to understand what software and hardware I have in my estate? So
that is probably what most people suffered with when it came to the network CMDB questions. That's a very good one. What people need to do is realise that understanding what's in their network is very, very difficult to maintain. It's most of us have Update Tuesdays or Update Wednesdays where we apply all our Microsoft updates because it's just as part of our operating system. Networks don't have that feature. You need to actually be aware of that one. So we in Intrinsic, we've got a service where we actually go out and we sniff around the network and we understand what we can actually get from a hardware level, life cycle, software, patches, vulnerabilities, so on and so forth. And there are tools and systems out there that can allow you to actually baseline where your estate is. And then that allows you, much like the RESILIA framework, to actually develop a corrective action plan, focusing on the right areas, working collaboratively and keeping it simple, using the 9 guiding principles to actually drive that change through the network in much the same way that you drive the GDPR change right the way through the business.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. We've actually got time for one more then, as you've finished that one. By design means that the sensitive data should not be requested by organisation from customer/user if not relevant in the first place. I'm not sure I've read that correctly, but you might be able to see the question.
I think I got that one. So security by design and privacy by design means that as well as thinking about our own internal work and processes and the way we actually handle data, should we also consider what we're asking end users for? Absolutely, 100%. If you don't need it, don't ask for it. So your privacy notices need to be updated and your consent forms will also need to be changed. So double negatives in consent, yes, I'll sign up to this marketing, has got to go. And it's got to be as easy to remove that consent as it is to give it. So yes, be very, very particular about the data that you are collating and then use it for the purpose that you're going to use it for. If you're going to use it for something else, you have to let people know and you have to give people the option to opt out. So yes, putting that by design approach to your customer data collection is a fantastic step.
Okay, thank you, John, for that. Just before we close, I just want to remind everyone, we had a couple of issues with the links in the resources list, which we've now fixed. So if you want to take a look at those are now working. And then we've also added an extra leaflet on RESILIA. So what you need to do to access those, if you literally just refresh your screen, then those should appear for you. Yeah, so that's everything from us. Just a reminder that the feedback survey will pop up on your screen. So do please take the time to do that. Yeah, so thank you to John for a great presentation, and that's everything from us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session on securing your networks using best practice. My name is Emma O'Sullivan and I'm the Marketing Executive at Axos. Today I'm also joined by Claire and Gemma in the room with me. Claire is our ITIL Marketing Lead and Gemma is our Marketing Lead for RESILIA. So before we hand over to John today, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping bits with everyone. So first of all, the session is recorded and you'll be emailed a copy of this tomorrow. So if you do want to share the session with colleagues or friends, then please do so.